of you today might be testers. I don't know if there's anyone here who is a tester, but if that's your case, it's honored to have you here, and I'm happy that you managed to be present at this fashion event. And we will have 4 minutes of presentation, and then 5 minutes for any question that might come up. And please feel free to ask those. You can write this on the chat, or if you want to speak directly to our guest Sofia, you can do it. Just raise your hand, and we will pass the word to you. So yes, there's this, and then we're going to jump right into our debate session. So today's guest is this incredible person named Sofia Pasotto. She currently studies in the University of Copenhagen, and we invited her because she can transmit information in a way that nobody else can. And she also has a TikTok page and an Instagram, so I recommend you to follow that and you understand why once you see it for yourself. And my favorite post of hers that I saw on her Instagram page, my favorite post of hers is, I'm not going to swear here, okay, but it's like F the patriarchy and not the planets. So yes, you understand when you see it for yourself. And yeah, that being said, I'm gonna give the space to you, Sophia. So feel free to share your screen, and thank you so much for accepting our invite. And just a little thumbs up that she promised us that we would have like a Harry Potter theme kind of presentation, and I brought my one for this, so I'm ready. the floor, the floor is yours, Sophia, and thank you so much.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think Gabriel really put the expectations way too high. But anyways, yeah, I'm Sophia. I'm very pleased to be here. It's actually my first presentation ever with slides and PowerPoint under that, so don't mind me. I tried to do a Harry Potter theme presentation, but then I failed. So I was like, yeah, let's see what's gonna go wrong and right. And we will see. Maybe next year we will kind of catch up again and see how my editing skills improved. I'm just gonna jump right into that and share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Wait, I'm quite a boomer on that, so you need to wait. Okay. Okay, perfect. So, can you not see? Can you see? No. Oh, this one. Okay. Are you able to see? Someone can give me like a heads up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Let's dive into that. So we're gonna just talk about climate conferences and how they work in Italy with national climate conferences and with international climate conferences. If you have any questions of all kind, also Gabriel said that, or Gabriel, I don't know, just put them in the chat, or I don't mind if you just turn on your microphone because I think it's easier, and I cannot currently see the chat. So do whatever you feel like doing and we'll be fine. So this is a bit of an overview. You see that I transitioned from Harry Potter theme to total banal and boring Windows style presentation, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So we'll just get through the whole who's the girl talking, like me, hopefully. Yeah. And then we will see what's a good recipe, just a recipe for a good climate conference in general. And then we'll dive into national conferences with regards to Italy. And then we will just, have a bit of an overview with international conferences and each of the most important conferences of the parties in the UNFCCC arena. And then we will see which are the most effective. This is a tricky question because I actually did not answer that. This is kind of a prompt for your debate after our small talk, and then we'll have question time. So hopefully everything will be clear, but just think about questions from now on and note them down. So we'll have a little bit of chat at the end. So who's talking? Me. Hello. I'm Sofia. I'm 22. And my personality trait right now is that I'm a climate activist. So what I do is climate activism. I used to do that in the streets, as we would say. But right now, I'm just doing that, focusing on the online part and on sharing the message and spreading awareness about climate change in particular, but I also talk about sustainability and environment in general. I studied international studies in Trento, at the University of Trento in Italy, and then I moved to Copenhagen, where I am right now in my little room, where I study a Master of Science in Climate Change. I did this particular academic path, because I want to go to work in the climate conferences. So that is actually my thing. And this presentation was so hard to make because there's so much stuff to say, and so I would say little time, so if you are curious about something, just don't be afraid to ask, and we will try to get into the whole view. I just put down a presentation, a very easy one, to give you the first impression of how climate conferences work and why they are so important. But that being said, there's no wrong question, there's no negative questions. Just ask them, and hopefully I will answer them in a sufficient way. Well, why do y'all call me to have this presentation? First, because I studied, I think, international relations and then climate change. And then because I also am a journalist for Destination COP, which is a collective of activists who are journalists, and we actually went to COP26. Yeah, that's me. That's very weird to say. Just put a picture of yourself like that. But I was there as a journalist, and I had the job to cover the whole conference in the most complete way, and also in the most accessible way. So in case you speak Italian and do not follow Destinazione COP yet, please do it, because I think that would be a great a way to have a great insight in the COP 26 and COP 27 and COP's work in general. So yeah, that was actually the activist area, the action area, and that was so cool. But I think that the apart from the outcomes of the conference itself, the highlight of the 2 weeks of COP was this, that I had to meet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is the congresswoman of the Democratic Party in the US. And yeah, I had to put this thing because I was about to cry when I did this presentation. I was like, yeah, I need to put it. Well, I cried a lot when I met her. So anyways, if you ever feel like wanting to do something different, just become a journalist, go to COP, and then cry over a congresswoman. That being said, let's dive into that, and let's see what is a climate conference. I'm pretty sure you can understand what is a conference, but what is a climate conference? So we have an arena, okay? We have a place, that it can be physical or just virtual place where parties meet, parties such as individuals, such as states, organizations, institutions, NGOs, IGOs, whatever, just people that talk to and with other people. Those parties have usually discussions, so they assess what's going on, what's going in the right direction, what's going to go in the wrong direction, how to tackle different issues. mostly related, of course, to climate change, but also the environment, sustainability, how to achieve climate goals, and so on. And then we've got decisions or suggestions that are taken at such conferences. When it comes to climate, usually the decisions are not binding. That is interesting because on the national level, most of the decisions are binding because, of course, you've got a certain corps of for example, the police, right? That they can implement and make people respect the law. But when it comes to international conferences, international agreements on climate, it's so hard to make states respect their word. So even though, for example, the US said, we're gonna give, I don't know, 10, 100 billion dollars to the world to solve climate change, and they never did it, there's no one who will go to them and say, hey, where's my money? No, unfortunately, it does not work like that. There's no court, there's nothing on an international and transnational level that can exert force and violence to guarantee the guarantee that state respect the agreement. So generally, these agreements are not binding agreements that come out of the common conferences, but sometimes they are, and we will see later. In these climate conferences, people usually either write down or use roadmaps. So a very visual way and a practical way to follow steps in order to achieve some climate agreements or some climate decision or some climate goals in general. So for example, we got the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that are the goals of the UN to 2030. So we've got more or less 8 years left, something like that. And of course, they will not just end on the 1st of January 2031. But up until 2030, we've got a roadmap. We've got some steps to undertake in order to be more sustainable, to achieve a more sustainable society. And with regards to the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, we've got, of course, 17 different topics that are separate but related, interconnected to one another. So this is also something very, very difficult to achieve in a climate conference, to understand how all these things work together. And then yes, so we've got this part of the let's say the circular motion of the whole overview of what is a climate conference. And then so we've got the ingredients for a successful climate conference. I'm talking about either national or international climate conferences, transnational, whatever we want. This is a famous, oh God, why did I put that? This is a famous TV program about cooking in Italy. And we've got flour. I called some experts and I was like, what are the ingredients for such a conference, such a successful conference? And these chefs told me flour, milk, vegetable milk, because we know that dairy products they have quite an impact on the environment. So let's stick with vegetable milk. And then we've got a pinch of salt, that's never wrong. Then we've got yeast and we've got sugar. Perfect. But then we need the essential ingredients of climate conferences. First of all, we've got commitment. Wow, I'm very impressed of my editing skills right now. That looks so bad. Anyways, we've got commitment. So commitment is when we saw individuals, NGOs, states They come together and they say, I want to do this, but I'm really willing to do this. It's not just words. I am actually willing to do this, and I will work hard in order to achieve the goals that we set. Okay? Commitment is quite the probably most essential ingredient of a climate conference, and of course of the climate agreement that comes out of the climate conference. And then we've got equity amongst parties. When we're in the international setting, but also at the national level, when we are just interacting, the parties are interacting. There are some parties that are more powerful than others, and we need to be careful, because when we're talking about climate conferences, the parties must be all on the same level, and they must be treated equally, and they must have the same possibilities to either be represented at the conference or just have the chance to speak up, and their vote has to be as relevant as someone else's. So, for example, let's take Russia, and let's take a very small, let's take, for example, the Maldives, okay? Of course, Russia has quite an influence on the Western world. And the Maldives, what are they? They are a small island, like small islands that are just, getting underwater with time because of climate change. So they will be more and more into the climate agreement, so that the whole world tackles climate change and acts against climate change. Well, probably Russia will be like, yeah, but we gotta keep, like, we have to keep going, we have to keep growing, we have to keep developing, and these two different visions will just contrast. But those two countries must have the same weight. Even though Russia is a huge country with a huge economy and the Maldives are not, they must be treated equally. I hope this makes sense. Then another essential ingredient is the will to put people and the environment over profit. This might be a little bit of an activist point of view, but don't mind me. It's actually very, very true. So as long as we have profit, just plain profit, it will be hard to solve climate change. Let me be honest, this is not something that is very present in climate conferences. So we've got states that they are quite committed, never fully, but we are really lacking the will to put people and the environment over profit. And this is because usually states, of course, the whole capitalist society works on profit, and if someone is left behind, they will just probably not be able to catch up again. So this is a point that is really to me essential. But we can have green growth, or we can have degrowth. This is a different approach that every one of us has towards the topic, and this could be also something that you can discuss after in the debate. And linked to this is foresight. So we need, in the climate conferences, we need to look at the long-term objective and not at the short-term profit. Most of the time, it's hard to think about something that will happen in 30 years. Who cares about who cares about the ice melting, or the just droughts, constant droughts in the Middle East and North Africa, or who will care about, I don't know, extreme weather events that will just hit the whole world. It's just so far away in time. But what is needed is foresight. So what is needed is to be able to look at the long-term objective and to listen to those who suggest to look at the long-term objective. So we need to trust the scientific community, and the people who are in the climate conferences need to be competent and need to have knowledge on the topic. Of course, we cannot, I don't think scientists at all can just implement policies, because politicians, it's politicians' job to do that. But politicians need to rely on science and on scientists who are those who have competence on the topic. And then lastly, we got lack of conflicts of interest. It's something that, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you are talking about climate change and you invite, and one of the parties is, for example, oil and gas company, of course they will want you to just push back the green transition, because they need to make profit. That profit that we were just talking about when saying that one of the ingredients is the will to put people in the environment over such profit. So lack of conflicts of interest means kicking polluters out of such conferences. Wow, this was unexpectedly long. Next on, we've got climate conferences in the Italian setting. We've got those who are called Conferenza Nazionale sul Clima, quindi National Conference on Climate, and they are organized by Italy for Climate. We will see in just 1 second what is Italy for Climate. So this conference takes place every year, and its main two goals are to assess the progress made by the country on the path to climate neutrality. So far, the climate neutrality, let's say that revolves around 2050 for most of the countries. Some of them have different goals and more, let's say, ambitious goals. Some of them really push back the climate neutrality thing of a couple of decades. So let's not talk about that, otherwise we will get depressed. And then the second point is that this conference is made to discuss the strategies to be put in place to achieve climate goals in the Italian setting. So scientists, politicians will just come, just gather around a table, and they will say, what's going on, what's happening, what can be done better, and what is our long-term objective. In 2020, it was created, the roadmap for Italy, the climate roadmap for Italy, to, let's say, I wrote that, making carbon neutrality the backbone of the recovery plan. So making sure that in the recovery plan, there was this solid base of we need to build back better, which is a US saying, but we need to build back sustainable and resilient and carbon neutral society. So Italy for Climate, what is this? Let me say, I did not properly know about this until some time ago. So I think it's interesting to know what it is. And it's an initiative of the Foundation for Sustainable Development in Italy. And their main goal is, let's say, three most relevant objectives are the promotion of a green economy, so green growth, in an optic of green growth, and it is made of a group of companies and businesses who are sensible to the issue of climate change. So we're talking about, of course, green growth and not degrowth. This is also something that you could talk about in the debate after. Is it better green growth, or is it better just to focus our climate conferences on degrowth? Two different things. Green growth means that You just keep growing in a sustainable way. But is there a sustainable way to grow? Or you just stop growing, you just stop over consuming, stop overproducing. You just consume and produce what you need, and you degrowth. You degrow to a more real, sustainable, and attached to nature way of living. Then the other important thing is that Italy for Climate is the reference point on climate change and energy issues when it comes to climate in Italy. So in politics, they should all refer to Italy for Climate because they will have all the answers. And then this initiative supports the transition of all sectors to sustainable objectives. Of course, this is because of green growth and not degrowth. What is also important is that Italy for Climate has valuable collaborators and partners. We've got Enea and ISPRA. So Enea is the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, while ISPRA is the Italian National Institute for Environmental Protection and Research. So we've got a very solid base of science, and this is what is needed. So we saw what our climate conferences in the national level, but let's see just very quickly. Just see very quickly what are international climate conferences. So international climate conferences, probably, well, hopefully you've heard about it. COPs, okay, climate change conferences of the UN. It's the conference of parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it takes place every year. Some of them are more scientific, some of them are more political, but they are as relevant as ever. The main goals are to assess the progress on the dealing with climate change on an international level. So how high are concentrations of CO2, or how high are greenhouse gas emissions? How bad is the situation of the ocean warming? Or how bad is ocean acidification? You know, that kind of things. And then at COP, you discuss the strategies to be put in place on the international level. So, for example, India will say, we will not eliminate totally the coal from our energy mix in 2050. We will not do that. While, for example, some other places, for example, Canada, they will say, no, we will go climate neutral by 2046, and so on. So each one discuss the strategies, and then they to enhance international cooperation. International cooperation is fundamental for international climate conferences because climate change is a transboundary issue. So it's not just in one place, it's not just in my room, it's in everyone's, and it will affect every part of the world. Of course, some people will be affected more than others because they will not have the means to cope with climate change. And this is also an issue that is needed to be resolved. And, you cannot leave a whole chunk of world behind. Anyways, in international climate conferences in the COPs, the IPCC, I messed up. It's not IPCC, it's IPCC. So International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think I put together COP and IPCC, so there's no convention in the IPCC. So the international Oh, that's it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is the scientific organism that produces assessments on how academic scientific literature is dealing with climate change. So what experts are saying and what are the new discoveries and stuff like that. So every report that is made by IPCC is actually quoted and is actually referred to in each COP. Let's say that the UNFCCC is the most relevant organism agency in the whole international climate conferences world, and the conferences rotate annually in the five UN regional groups. And there's not just COPs, so conferences of parties of the UNFCCC, but we also have the conferences of the parties of different agreements. We've got the conferences of the parties of the Kyoto Protocol and the conferences of the parties of the Paris Agreement, because not everyone signed, not everyone ratified the agreements, the different agreements that are that have been made in the past during COPs. So we've got the Kyoto Protocol that has been ratified by 192 parties, and we've got the Paris Agreement, which has been ratified by 194 parties. In the whole setting, in the whole UNFCCC setting, the COP, so the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC, has been ratified by 197 parties, so the whole world. Just a quick overview of how the fairy tale began. It was in 1992, and the United Nations Framework on Climate Change has been created. And this was for two reasons: to tackle rising temperatures that were an issue also in 1992, and to find strategies to reduce GHGs, so greenhouse gases concentrations in the atmosphere. These were the main goals of the Framework Convention. And then in 1995, there was the first COP ever in Berlin, and the president was Angela Merkel. And then in 1997, at COP number 3, has been proposed, the COP just ended in the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was the first ever to include a concrete and legally binding commitment. However, the commitment was just on a voluntary basis, so everyone was just like, yeah, I'm gonna do that, or no, I'm not gonna do that. And it only concerned developed countries. So developed countries actually had a disincentive on ratifying the agreement, because they were thinking that not only developed countries themselves should have just tackled climate change, but also it was required an effort from developing countries. This is also the reason why the Kyoto Protocol had a slow implementation. In fact, from 1997 to 2005, it was not ratified by the minimum parties. It only was ratified in 2005. The whole goal was a reduction of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere by 2012. And it was on the concentrations of 1990. So after COP3, which was, let's say it was a pillar, but it could have been better. We've got the Bali Road Map In Bali in 2007, there was the COP 13, and in this exact moment, it was planned the structure that is still used in international climate negotiations and conferences. So we've got 4 different topics: mitigation, adaptation, climate finance, and technologies. And these are the topics that are still used right now to tackle different aspects of climate change. Then in 2009, we've got COP 15 in Copenhagen, where I am right now. The Copenhagen Accords, let me just put it there, were just delusion, total failure. But anyways, it's the first time that has been said that the world, the international arena, the international setting must cooperate to keep temperature rise under 2 degrees. So under 2 degrees of warming. It was very hyped. It was something that the scientific community was waiting for, because climate change is not something that just came up these years, the last couple of years, but it's something that has been observed and tried to be tackled by the whole scientific community in the last 30 years. There is evidence that some oil companies' advisor actually tried to hide the climate change consequences of the oil company in 1980. So it's been a while since. And in at COP 15, the first one of the goals, one of the main consequences was that the international community said we will give $10 billion every year by 2020 to developing countries. And developed countries will just cooperate together to make sure that developing countries can still develop, but in a more sustainable way. This has a lot of debate on because this is also something that you can debate on. What if do developed countries have the right to tell developing countries not to develop, or not to develop in the way that developed countries want? That's a question that I am asking you, and just reflect on that. How can we conciliate these 2 visions? How can developing countries still develop, and how can developed countries help developing countries develop in a more sustainable way? That was a whole game of words. So yeah, in the end, the Copenhagen Accords were a last chance because no binding agreement came out of that, and the commitments were not that ambitious. In 2015, we arrived at COP21, the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is basically it's the whole activism world. This is because it was the first binding agreement on climate change. And in this case, the international community said, we will keep the temperature rise well below 2 degrees and possibly within 1.5. This is because the example that I made earlier with Russia and the Maldives. So the Maldives will just go underwater with 1.5 degree of warming. Well, Russia will probably not. So Russia actually pushed, for example, for a 2 degree warming, like a maximum of 2 degree warming, and the Maldives were like, hey, we're gonna go underwater with 1.5. How are we gonna do it with 2? And so there was the same, possibly within 1.5. In the Paris Agreement, there were commitments to net zero by 2050 by most of the countries present, the parties present. And net zero includes carbon capture and storage, for example, due to carbon sinks and geoengineering. So carbon sinks are forests, and geoengineering is carbon capture, for example. At COP21, the NDCs were established, so the national determined contributions, that are, of course, contributions updated every 5 years, in which the country says what they are gonna do climate change wise, mitigation wise, just how the whole country is going to cope with climate change, and what is the strategy of the whole country to tackle climate change in the international setting. The NDCs must be more ambitious every 5 years than the 5 years just passed. And then we arrive at COP26. COP26 was probably the one with the highest expectations ever, and it was a television, of course. In this conference, developing countries asked for urgent actions. Not everyone, though. For example, small island countries asked developed countries to actually respect the words that they have given, and to contribute economically to the sustainable development of such countries. While, for example, other countries, bigger countries such as India, they tried to push back the whole climate agreement, but we will see that in a second. One of the main points was the money. So where are the funds that have been promised in Copenhagen in 2009? What are the funds that have been promised in 2015 in the whole Paris Agreement setting? Where is the money? So that was the biggest question ever. And the outcomes are disappointing. Yeah. So disappointed but not surprised. In the Glasgow Climate Pact, which is how it's called, the whole final pact, it was closed finally, the Paris Agreement chapter. So we found a way to deal with the carbon markets with transparency and with common timelines. So everyone will do this by this date. However, in the final agreement, in the final pact, there was not written phase out of coal, but phase down. That was actually a very disappointing point for everyone there, but not for the ones that actually proposed that. India, in this case, did that. So we've got a phase down of coal because, of course, the energy mix of India is highly reliant on coal, and then here we have to consider the differences between the countries. What is wrong or for a country will not necessarily be wrong for another country. So, for example, for small islands, they really pushed for the phase out of coal because their lives are threatened by the whole sea level rise. Well, for India, they were like, hey, but we live with coal. Our energy mix is fully reliant on coal, so we will need the phase down word. Words are very important, so in the end, to kind of get to an agreement, some states gave up, I would say, and they said, okay, let's do phase down. We will tackle the phase out in the next COP. Then we had no accord on climate finance. So the famous $100 billion were not very much tackled, but some states actually made some commitments during and after COP26, saying we will give this much money to developing countries in order to face climate change or mitigate or adapt to it. Climate Action Tracker, which is a very reliable source, and I would actually suggest you to just subscribe to their newsletter or just browse some articles because they're very, very interesting. They said that the current commitments will lead to an increase of 2.4 degrees at the end of the century. And it is bad. It is very bad. However, some other agencies say that the increase will only lead to 1.8 at the end of the century. Still, in one case, the 2 degrees maximum limit will be exceeded. In other ways, in other points of view, it will not. However, we can do better. This is something that anyone can consider we can do better. Then we had some small agreements between coalitions and states, for example, the Oil and Gas Alliance, and reduction of deforestation and reduction of methane emissions and stuff like that, but they are not binding. So they're just something to make states feel better about themselves and about not actually have a binding agreement on climate change. Something that we really, really, really need to think about is that at COPs, we've got 197 states. We've got different worldviews, we've got different social, economic, and political situations. We've got different approaches to climate change and different responsibilities. So it's very hard, it's impossible to say COP went well or COP went really bad. No, we cannot say that. We can say disappointed but not surprised because of that. But we it's not that I want to be super, super negative about it. We really need to act right now in order to change things. So every conference that does not reach an agreement, like an ambitious agreement, is just a lost chance. So here was my presentation. I hope it was interesting, and I actually put here some examples of some questions that you can discuss in the debate. So, what are the missing ingredients in current climate conferences? So, for example, why COP26 did not go as planned, in your opinion, or which are the most effective between national and international climate conferences? Do you think that at the national level you can do more than the international level? How is it gonna go, and how would the national level influence the international, or the other way around? And COP26, in your opinion, was a success? So yeah, this is my presentation, and I would love to answer some of your questions if we have time. I actually did 45 minutes, so we might be late, but yeah, I'm very interested in hearing your opinions on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofia. So we thought about take our picture right now because Sofia is here yet. So if okay for everyone, we can turn on the camera and we take our last picture of Econnected 2022. And right after that, we're gonna open the breakout rooms. Okay. So, anyone else? Okay, so smile. Great. I don't know if, oh, wait, some people open right now. Okay, so one more. Right. So I don't know if anyone have any questions for Sofia, can raise their hand or open the microphone. Okay. So thank you. Oh, yeah, Asia.
So Sophia, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. But when you were talking about the developing countries, that did spark my interest because personally, I believe it's not right that developed countries tell developing countries what to do because I think that's very, I don't know, they don't really know the situation in terms of poverty sometimes. But my biggest question was, what about those multinational companies that are actually have origins from developed countries, but they just take resources from, from undeveloped countries. For example, like Nigeria and their delta. I think it's a Dutch company and an English company that have basically all control of the fossil fuels in that area and the oils and the gas. Yet at the same time, it's the Nigerians that are suffering, in terms of economy because it's not their company, it belongs to a Dutch company, and also especially in terms of global impact. So in those cases, do they talk about that in the conferences?
That's a very interesting question. It is actually what I was referring to as lack of conflict of interest. So in Nigeria, for example, we've got Dutch, English, and Italian companies who are exploiting the resources. At COPs in general, it actually was born in 2016, 2017, or 2018, a campaign that's called Polluters Out, and that aims at just kicking out big polluters and big polluting companies from COPs. And that is because they are actually like these big companies and multinationals, they are exploiting resources from the developing and underdeveloped countries, and they just keep pushing back the green transition. So in COP26, we had the biggest delegation was not of a state, but it was of the oil and gas industry. So people who were from delegations, like national delegations, also were of, for example, Eni or Shell or GP or just big oil companies. It's something that as of now we cannot tackle because they are so big, but we can actually put pressure on them. So we can just support the campaign Polluters Out and make sure that the companies and the states are held accountable for their actions. So it's actually very bad. And the whole, probably if we did not have those multinational companies in the conferences of parties, we would be way ahead because there's a lot of influence from their part. But I will suggest you to just follow Polluters Out on Instagram, and I can write it down in the chat, and you can just Google that. It's very interesting. Thank you so much for your question.
I have a question as well. From a socio-economic point of view, how do you believe is the right way to help society evolve from the prejudices that they have against developing countries? Because here in Europe, like I see, there's still a lot of that prejudice from people who are from Latin America, Arabic countries, Africa, and I just think I'm kind of tired of hearing about it, but I think it's just something that if we were to evolve as a society, make things more sustainable, do you see that as a problem that would have to be looked into?
For sure, for sure. Social and environmental justice go hand in hand. So I do believe that those who are suffering of the climate change related consequences are also those who are the poorest, or who are the ones that cannot really tackle climate change themselves. So when it comes to prejudice and stuff like that, we really see the developed world, the Western world, being so heavy and so irresponsible towards the things, like their our actions, because the Western world development was in 1880, from 1880 and to still now, and we cannot really tackle climate change without tackling the social and economic challenges that we are seeing in the underdeveloped or developing world. So I think that's something that must be looked into for sure, for sure. Thank you so much for your question.
Great, guys. So we're gonna start the debates. Polly said that Sofia want to join to the debate. I don't know if you still want to, but if you do, just tell us that we put you into some breakout.
I actually have to go to class, so I'm sorry to
Oh, no,
miss that.
okay.
Yeah, sorry,
No,
but
that's
you gotta do
okay.
what you gotta do. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me.
thank you so much for accepting our invite. It was really great. I'm sure that everyone loved it, your presentation. Thank you so much.